Jaelan Phillips picked up sports around the age of 5 years old. He played with a reckless abandon, and by the time he was 7, dude had already suffered multiple head injuries as a child. And unfortunately for Jaelan, remnants of those innocent injuries from way back in the day would still echo well over a decade later, inadvertently changing the course of Jaelan's life, transforming a 6'5", 250-pound 5-star recruit bound for the NFL into a 6'5", 218-pound music student attending a community college. His story in some ways, and stay with me on this, kind of reminds me of Disney's The Lion King. The same way Simba left his kingdom because he was told it was the best move for him to make at the time, Jaelan did the same. He went full Hakuna Matata in music school until one day he got that call that the kingdom needed him. Dude had lived in exile from the sport for quite a while and had zero intentions of going back. But through a little bit of persuasion, he decided to return to the lands where he once roamed as an apex predator, with his lion's mane fully intact. This is what happened to Jaelan Phillips, the 5-star recruit who lost it all before coming back in a blaze of glory to claim what was rightfully his. Without further ado, y'all already know what time it is, man. Cue the Wayne. Okay, real quick before we jump into the video, it's time to give a shout out to today's video sponsor, Current. In a nutshell, Current is basically a mobile bank with a Visa debit card. Now again, this is a real bank account. This is not a prepaid card. And the account offers a couple of cool features. One, you can get paid up to 2 days early. Secondly, it'll cover you for up to $100 in overdraft fees. So if you do have a small emergency, you got a little bit of coverage. That way it can hold you down until payday. They call it the future of banking because it's a real bank account that you can set up online and just have it shipped to your house in a couple of days. You can send money and obviously receive it. Plus it works with Apple Pay, Google Pay, Cash App, Venmo, everything. There's a bunch of other little cool convenient features as well. For instance, you can use the camera on your phone to deposit your checks. You earn points and rewards through the card, and there's no hidden fees or minimum balance requirements. So if you need a simple way to open an account, stack, move, and receive money, this might be the move for you. Shout out to Current once again for sponsoring the video. Without further ado, let's get it. From ages 5 to 7, Jaelan Phillips suffered a few injuries while primarily playing baseball and basketball. So at 7 years old, he made the only logical move. He picked up football. Definitely not the conservative choice, but he fell in love with the game. The dude was a natural and one day it would pay off big. Despite that, Jaelan wasn't your typical athlete. Dude was the son of 2 musicians who literally met while playing in an orchestra. Before he even hit high school, he had traveled to Haiti, Germany, and Jamaica. I know cats that's 30 years old that still ain't never left the country. I know cats that's 30 years old who ain't never left their town or city. I think this early travel was crucial for Jaelan. Perspective is everything, and the broader your horizons, generally the better. But as broad as those horizons may have been, on the field, tunnel vision. As a sophomore in high school, Jaelan received his first D1 scholarship offer, and he probably thought about framing that thing, but by the end of his sophomore season, the scholarships was just piling up in a box under his bed. He finished that year with 27 total scholarship offers as a sophomore. It quickly all became normal for Jaelan. He was the man, that's just the way it was. By the time he was a senior, ESPN only ranked 2 players in the entire country ahead of him. One of the top rated interior linemen in this year's draft, Trey Smith from Tennessee, and recently troubled but former first-round pick, Isaiah Wilson. Throughout his high school career, Jaelan recorded 264 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 picks, all while maintaining a 4.4 GPA. He was a pass rushing savant, recording 32 sacks in his high school career, with a ridiculous 21 of them coming during his senior season. Ultimately, he decided to accept the scholarship offered at UCLA, becoming one of the school's most coveted recruits ever. But unfortunately, things would not go according to plan. Early on, Jaelan was everything the hype suggested he'd be, recording 5 tackles and 1.5 sacks in his very first collegiate game as the Bruins took out Texas A&M now 45-44. But only 3 games into his true freshman season, Jaelan suffered a high ankle sprain. He eventually fought his way back onto the field, only to sprain the other ankle, and then, the big one, he suffered a concussion. This would prematurely end the true freshman season. In his abbreviated 6-game freshman season, Jaelan recorded 21 tackles and 3.5 sacks. This obviously put a huge damper on Jaelan's coming out party. Although it was to no fault of his own, Jaelan had fallen extremely short of the expectations he set for himself. With that said, football had always come easy to him, and this was probably the most adversity he dealt with inside the sport itself. It was his first test, and as far as mindset goes, Jaelan passed the quiz with flying colors. Rededicating himself to the game, dude was ready to come back the following year and take over. Year 2 was about to be a movie. Dude had his plans well laid, but the universe had a different route for him in mind. In January of 2018, going into Jaelan's sophomore year, dude was involved in a bad accident. He was riding his scooter one day when a car drifted into the bike lane. Jaelan slammed on his brakes and flew off the scooter, leaving a grown man-sized dent in the side of the car. The accident left him with a busted up wrist that needed to be surgically repaired, and even worse, his second recorded concussion. Still, he was able to suit up for his second season of college ball on opening day. He wasn't 100%, but with the new coaching staff, he wanted to make a good first impression, so he pushed through. Unfortunately though, luck would not be on his side. In the 4th game of the season, Jaelan was involved in yet another awkward collision on the football field, suffering his 3rd recorded concussion since enrolling at UCLA. Now it's interesting because only 1 year later, UCLA would be sued by 3 former players who played under the coaching staff Jaelan came in under. The $15 million lawsuit claimed that all 3 players had suffered concussions that were mishandled by the university. In the lawsuit, they alleged that the players were forced back into action well before fully recovering from their concussions, and in some cases, even forced into unnecessarily brutal football drills that included head-to-head contact. Now, in the lawsuit, the players basically say they were expected to play through pain. Now again, that lawsuit was filed a year after Jaelan's final concussion at UCLA, so I don't know if UCLA had any prior knowledge that the lawsuit may have been coming. But the university did implement a policy that forces student athletes to medically retire after 3 concussions. Thing is, that could have been a long-standing rule that was there the whole time, or it could have been something a little bit more recent, I'm not sure. But regardless to when that forced medical retirement rule was implemented, Jaelan was on number 3, and that meant the former baseball player had officially struck out. With his long-term health being called into question, the former 5-star recruit was forced to medically retire from the sport. And for the first time since he was a sophomore in high school, Jaelan's future was up in the air. Now, a medical retirement is a relatively rare occurrence in college football. This is not the same as a medical red shirt, which of course happens all the time. A medical red shirt allows a player who has a season-ending injury to basically get that year wiped off their record and gain an additional year of eligibility. So if a senior broke his leg early in the year, he could apply for a medical red shirt and then gain an additional season to be able to come back and play. But a medical retirement is a little bit different. A medical retirement is used when a player suffers an injury so severe that they're thought to not be able to participate in their sport anymore, like period, like they're done. Assuming they're on scholarship, they're removed from the roster, but still able to take advantage of the financial benefits of an athletic scholarship, meaning the school will still be paid for. But the thing is, and this is why a team would push for a medical exemption or a medical retirement, same thing, that player, even though their school still paid for, would no longer count against the scholarship limit that the school has. Like each school, and most of y'all probably know this, but each university has a finite amount of scholarships to give out each season. So once dude get hurt and they feel like he's not coming back, if he goes ahead and signs up for the medical retirement, they can get that scholarship back, give it to another player. But when I first started to learn about this whole thing, it was heavily implied that once you go through with a medical retirement, that's it, your college career is done, you can't come back. But that's not necessarily the case. More on that later. Imagine being a 5-star recruit, not a 4, not a 3, not a 2. Go to college, have success early, be slowed by injury, and then over the course of only 2 years, you're forced to walk away from the sport that you thought you'd play for the next 15 years of your life. Jaelan quickly realized something. He didn't know who he was without football. If he's not the 5-star recruit that's NFL bound, Who was he? He'd grown accustomed to people treating him a certain way. He was a cut above. He was special. But over the course of a year, with that completely stripped away, dude had to dig deep. Without football, who was Jaelan Phillips? He started out working at his dad's law firm, but when you was getting sacks in a D1 football game a couple months ago, that might not really be able to fill that void for you. So he decided to pursue another passion. The son of two musicians, naturally, decided to pursue music. He attended LA Community College to study up on the subject. He would later recall students playing their instruments in the hallway, saying every day would kind of play out like a Harry Potter scene. This man actually kind of accomplished a lot during that time. He got a community college certificate for audio engineering, helped engineer a whole album by an artist named Heaven Above All, and even worked as an intern for iHeartRadio, helping to set up shows for like Six Flags and stuff like that. Though he obviously didn't start out at the top of his new fields, I think he proved in that short period of time that he had the capacity to be really damn good at whatever he decided to do. But despite that, there was something missing. He said it was almost like he'd gone through a really bad breakup and was trying to move on. He was trying to fully dedicate his life to music, but it seemed like his love for football just wouldn't go away. A full year had passed and Jaelan was still out there searching, but the game he left behind was searching for him. During the family cruise, Jaelan received a text message from his old UCLA coach. Apparently, David Shaw, head coach at Stanford, was trying to get in touch with him. Once Jaelan returned that call, the word that he was thinking about making a comeback to football started to spread around. And before too long, he had spoken to coaches at USC and Miami. They all wanted to gauge his interest on returning to the sport. Now for Jaelan, this was a heavy decision. Dude has suffered a ton of head trauma, literally since the time he was a child, not to mention the 3 recorded concussions at UCLA. Jaelan ended up going on multiple visits, and he ultimately chose the U. But believe it or not, the thing that swayed him to go to Miami wasn't the football program. It was the music program. Miami has a top-tier music engineering program, and when Jaelan sat down with one of the professors, they ended up hitting it off. The hour-long meeting went so well that the professor, who initially was not enthusiastic about this whole meeting situation, literally agreed to bend his class schedule around Jaelan's football schedule. So in 2019, a full year after medically retiring from the sport, Jaelan Phillips enrolled at the University of Miami. When I first started looking at this story, this was the part that kind of had me stuck a little bit. When I initially looked up medical retirement, here's what I found. Medically retired athletes do not count towards their former program's total scholarship limit. Then it goes on to say, medical retirement also cannot be undone. If the athlete makes an unexpected recovery, they cannot regain NCAA eligibility. But at this point in the story, there's 3 colleges actively recruiting a medically retired player. So my question coming in was, then how the hell was Jaelan Phillips able to do it? And the answer is that article was incorrect. You can do it. Let me explain. When you accept the medical red shirt, you can not only come back, you could technically come back to play for the same school that you were at originally. But playing for the same school you were at originally can only happen if a set of completely unrealistic circumstances were to take place. Check out this excerpt from the NCAA Division I manual. If circumstances change and a student athlete subsequently practices or competes at the institution at which the incapacitating injury or illness occurred, the student athlete again shall become a counter, and the institution shall be required to count that financial aid under the limitations of this bylaw in the sport in question during each academic year in which the financial aid was received. So basically that means if the student athlete makes a miraculous recovery, UCLA would have had to leave an open scholarship for each year that Jaelan was out, because if he comes back, he has to count against their scholarship limit for those years he missed. But we all know 99.9 times out of 100, a D1 school especially is gonna fill that scholarship spot. Therefore, there will be no free scholarship there, so you can't go back to the school that you was at. But you can, however, transfer to another school, and then you're just subject to the regular transfer rules, sitting out a year. Easy. And I know that's not essential information for the story, but I went down that rabbit hole because I was curious, and I decided to just bring y'all with me. So boom, back to the story. Though he never stopped moving forward, Jaelan had no idea where he was going. His final days at UCLA weren't the same as his early days at the school. People questioned his love for the game, and Jaelan had questions too. Practice, weightlifting, and the game itself had all become a struggle for him. This was likely due to the mental strain he was dealing with due to his injuries and concussions. He couldn't stop thinking about the potential damage he was doing to his body, and once he got to that third concussion, he was actually relieved that UCLA had this rule. It gave him a way out, a much needed break. Time to reboot. But they say absence makes the heart grow fonder, and over the course of the next year or so, somewhere deep inside, a love was rekindled. When Jaelan Phillips went in on music, dude went all the way in. He didn't work out at all during that time and dropped down from his 250-pound frame to a lean 218. So even without the transfer rules, he probably needed to sit out a year anyway and just get his body back right. So during that first year in Miami, that's exactly what he did. Dude got back in the weight room and rebuilt his NFL body. Every day for a year while the team was at practice, Jaelan hit the weights. We talking 2 and 3 hour sessions. As far as food, he had to eat a ton of calories, 250 grams of protein. That was his number daily. And that ain't an easy number to hit if you ever tried that, like not on a daily basis. Protein is hella satiating, so you get to the point where you so full, like eating is not even pleasurable. It's just all business. After a slow start, Jaelan began dominating in workouts, and the people who had initially felt his slim appearance didn't match his reputation kind of began to change their tune. Dude just kept working hard, and eventually things started to line up for him. Jaelan wasn't even projected to be in the starting lineup, but he accepted his projected role the same way he'd accepted his fate years earlier when he thought his career was over. And it's crazy how things work out when your energy and your hard work is like lined up. Like when you in line and you doing what you're supposed to do with the right frame of mind, things just seem to work out, and that's exactly what happened. Gregory Rousseau, who was projected to start in front of Jaelan and is now projected as a first-round pick in this year's draft, out of nowhere, he decided to opt out for last season over concerns about the pandemic, which is understandable. And just like that, Jaelan, who was prepared to come off the bench, slid right into a starting role. 3 games into the season, and Jaelan could not believe he nearly walked away from the sport forever. Flooded with emotion, in the locker room before Miami was set to take on Florida State, dude just had to say something. So he stood up. He looked at his coaches and teammates and said what he felt. He spoke about how the team had saved him, made him believe in himself again. He told them how grateful he was to be a part of the team and how humbled he felt. One of his teammates, when asked, had this to say. The way he said it and the passion he came with, you could tell he meant it. Following Jaelan's speech, Miami would go on to smash Florida State 52-10. After an adjustment period, dude regained his form, and he ended up recording 45 tackles and 8 sacks in only 10 games this past season. Then, despite building back up to 260 pounds, the defensive end ran a 4.5 40 and a 4.1 shuttle at his pro day. And now, only a couple of years removed from literally retiring from the sport, Jaelan Phillips is projected to be a first or second round pick in the 2021 NFL draft. It's kind of like when Thor lost his powers in the first movie. He had to go on this epic journey as a normal guy, and he was able to get a completely different perspective on life. And now that he's proven to be worthy once again and his powers have been returned, Jaelan looks to catch lightning in a bottle again during his upcoming NFL career. Regarded by many as the most talented edge rusher in the draft, Jaelan is only held back by one thing. Teams are leery of his injury history, specifically his history of concussions. I'll be honest, it's a scary proposition. Remember, by his own account, Jaelan does have some head trauma going all the way back to the time he was a kid. But on the bright side, he did play this last full season at Miami with no real hiccups. And just because you have an injury history in college doesn't mean that's gonna necessarily follow you into the NFL. Frank Gore tore his ACL twice in college, and that dude went on to have an 80-year career in the league. Now, head injuries are obviously in a different category than knee injuries, but all I can do here is be optimistic. Look, what y'all want from me, man? You never know what life has in store for you. So instead of constantly looking back in the past, even when things seem their darkest, you gotta keep moving forward. Your destiny awaits. Thanks to Current once again for sponsoring the video. Remember, the link's in the description if you want to grab you a Current card today.